Remember those old Flash games? You know which ones I'm talking about. The ones on Cool Math games, like Fire Boy and Water Girl, or Raft Wars, or even something like Learn to Fly. Well, I wanted to make a game with that exact aesthetic, and I did exactly that for Ludum 54. So I was looking at these Flash games and I needed to figure out what was the core thing that a lot of them had in common. And I found out this was progressional upgrades. Think of a game like Flight. There's the core loop of going out and getting money, doing a run along the way. And then with this money, you're going to upgrade your paper airplane, which will allow you to earn more money in future runs. This core loop of going out and earning resources and then coming back and upgrading appeared in many Flash games that I saw. So I was going to use exactly that for my game. So like I said, I made this game for Ludum 54, which is a game jam. For those of you who don't know what a game jam is, basically you have a set amount of time to make a game. For Ludum you have 72 hours to make it completely from scratch. And another thing with game jams is they have to be within a theme. The theme for this one was limited space. Now you can interpret this theme however you want, but for me, I interpreted it in two different ways. The first was limiting your space you can go out and collect resources, and the next was a little more abstract. Since my game was based mostly around drifting, you're also going to have limited space to drift. So now that I had the core idea down, I got right into making the game. The first thing I did is get the controls down, as I wanted these to be smooth. So I started out pretty simple, just getting the car drifting around. I then tweaked the numbers to make sure it felt good right off the bat. Next, I needed a way to encourage the player to drift. The first way I did this is with I attached a massive gun to the top of the car, and it made it whenever there's an enemy in front of the car, it'll start shooting. But there's a little twist. Car will never stop moving. What this meant is you couldn't stop in front of an enemy to shoot at it very easily. Instead, having to drift around the enemy. This added an extra incentive to drift around the enemies, and it felt really good to actually hit the bullets. So whenever I do game jams, I try to simplify the game down as much as possible. I want to make sure the game could be picked up and played by pretty much anyone, as generally when people are rating games for a game jam, they only spend around 5 minutes anyways playing it, just to get the feel of the game. The first way I did this is with the shooting. I had the car shoot automatically, checking line of sight in front of the car. Whenever there's an enemy within this line of sight, it'll shoot on its own, just reducing the amount of inputs needed by the player. Another way I did this is by making the car accelerate automatically. Typically within driving games, the player either has to hold down W or a trigger to keep their car moving forward and accelerate. I just completely removed this, instead having the car accelerate on its own. This is another way I just reduce the amount of inputs, making sure the player can really focus on just drifting and what they want to actually go after, scavenging resources. But before getting into that, why don't you check out my Discord? In this Discord, I just like to talk to my community, as well as show off progress on my games. So if any of this sounds interesting, why don't you check out the link in the description. And since you made it this far, why don't you like the video and hit the subscribe button while you're down there. Now let's get back to it. Now that I had the drifting down and the shooting down, I needed scavenging resources in the game. So in my head, this is how I pictured the core loop. Player will have their home base where they have their buggy and all the upgrades. The player will then go out into the outlands, scavenging for junk and trying not to waste their space. The player will only have a limited amount of spaces to actually collect junk. And this made it so the player had to go out and collect as much junk as they can and then come back. With this idea, I quickly got it in, scattering the junk around the outlands at random. I also made different piles, which each give a different amount of junk for which the player can collect. I wanted to make sure it was clear exactly how much the player had as well. So I have it both in the UI on the left, as well as trailing behind the player, following it. This just gave a nice little visual for the player, as they can see exactly how much junk they've collected over their run. Now it's time to make sure the theme fit into the game a little bit better. So I wanted to make it so you could have equipment whenever you're going out to scavenge. This equipment will make you more powerful, such as having more top speed or doing more damage, but they come with the trade-off of taking up a scavenging slot. So with this idea, I set up the base area. I got all these buttons working, upgrading different parts of the buggy. I wanted to make sure the art for this really fit the Flash game feel I was going for. So I had all these upgrades visually change your car a little bit. This just made it so the player could see their car getting more powerful over time. Another thing I did to get the Flash game feel was to give everything a bold outline. This included text, UI elements, sprites. Overall, everything had a bold outline just to really sell the cartoony look. I also wanted the animations to be a little bit goofy. So I had the buttons really over exaggerated with the pop whenever you hover over them. I did little things like this just to make sure the feel was really there. Next up was making the combat. So I wanted the combat to be pretty straightforward, because like I said, I wanted the game to be simplified since it's a game jam. For the combat, there's two ways to kill the zombies: ramming into them or drifting around them and shooting them. I wanted to make sure the player had a lot of feedback whenever doing these actions, just making sure the game felt really good to play. So I made this art for the zombie and then got it into the game. Then I got to work on ramming the zombies. I wanted to make it so when you ram a zombie, it goes flying in the other direction to really sell the impact. To do this, I just deleted the zombie and spawned a ragdoll one instead, giving it movement in the other direction with a little bit of random variation. I also made it bounce off of objects, so it'll bounce off of buildings and barricades within the stage. This just played into the goofy nature of the game. I then went further with the juice, adding a hit flash, some screen shake, some lines to go outward, and a little bit of hit stop, so the time actually briefly stops whenever you hit a zombie. All of this just came together to really sell the impact that you're hitting the zombie. On top of this, I wanted no negative feedback for the player, only focusing on positive systems. The first one was pretty pretty straightforward. I just have text pop up whenever you get a ram kill or a drift kill, just giving a little bit more incentive for the player. I also added a combo multiplier. This combo multiplier does nothing, but having the numbers say ×2 or ×3 kill just felt really good. Biggest thing that I did to really push the positive systems instead of negative ones is with the health. So typically in games like this, when your health reaches 0, your run's over and you go back to your base to upgrade. But like I said, I wanted no negative systems, so I figured, how am I going to change that? Well, instead of health, I changed it to durability. So whenever you get a ram kill, it lowers your durability by 1. And as a player, what you're thinking, whenever you hit 0, your run's over. But that's not actually what happens in this game. When you reach 0 durability in this game, instead, you just lose extra XP. So I gave the extra XP for ram kills and drifting kills, but at 0 durability, you're just not going to get these bonuses. Having it set up this way made it so the player can continue their run and keep getting XP and keep getting kills, but they won't get negatively punished for actually going out and hitting zombies. This just made the game overall feel a lot better to play, because you didn't really have the fear of holding back from using all of your resources. With all these positive systems in place, I just needed to get the core gameplay loop in now. With it being a game jam, I wanted there to be a set end goal for the player to work towards. This just gave the player a little bit more incentive to continue on. And on top of this, when they reach this end goal, they feel a little bit better about playing the game because they completed it. And that's when I thought about escaping the Outlands. So I kept it pretty straightforward. So I had the map be called the Outlands and I added a toxic river to the end. I then put a giant ramp right in front of this toxic river. This allowed me to show the ramp and give a really clear defined goal. Use the ramp. Whenever you give someone a car and a ramp, naturally they're going to want to use it. So having this clear goal pushed players forward, but I wanted to make sure they also spent a little bit of time within the game. So I added these barricades halfway along the stage. This just made it so the player had to reach a certain level before they can even reach the ramp. This gated progression also allowed me to introduce mechanics over time. Introducing mechanics over time is something I really like to do within game jams. I don't want to overwhelm the player really early on with a bunch of text and a bunch of mechanics that they have to learn. This will just confuse them. Instead, I want to strip it down so they can learn mechanics over time. How I did it in this game is through this leveling up system. At level 1, the player just drifts forward, collects resources, and upgrades. It's pretty straightforward. When they reach level 2, that's when they unlock the equipment. This will just add a little bit more complexity to their runs. After doing a couple more runs, they're going to reach level 3. Level 3 introduces these things called drift zones. These drift zones just add a little more incentive to keep going forward. These drift zones just give a side mechanic to the runs themselves, just adding a little more complexity and fun to the runs. This also allowed me to give more rewards out, as the upgrades are going to get more expensive as the game goes on. After this, level 4 is when the barricades open, which allows the player to go ahead and use the ramp. Introducing these systems over time just made sure I didn't overwhelm them completely, with drift zones and the ramp and everything else all at once. Instead, I wait until level 2 to even show the ramp. This just ensured the player can get the controls down, as well as the core loop of going out and scavenging and upgrading before even giving them an end goal. And then on top of it, right when the player understands all of these systems, I introduce a new mechanic with the drift zones. This just keeps the game evolving throughout the entire playthrough. Now that I had all the progression in and the game felt in a really good state, I had to do the best part, the ending cutscene. For the ending cutscene, I wanted to stick with the stereotypes. When you think of a car going off a ramp in a movie, you're thinking of the slow motion. So this is exactly what I added. I hooked it up so when the player reaches all the requirements to use the ramp and they touch it, it starts this little cutscene. This will just set the car on a set path, as well as having the slowdown animation. I made sure to keep the animation a little bit goofy just to fit the overall aesthetic. With this final cutscene, the entire game was done. After the player completes the game, I have the logo come up, as well as just telling them that they escaped Outlands. This just gave a nice end goal for the player, so they really know that they completed the game. So within this game jam, I wanted to make sure to keep everything simple, and I think I achieved exactly that. If you want to check out the game, click the link down below and you can go play it yourself. Now here are the results from the game jam. Overall, I did pretty well, as the main category I was focused on was the fun anyways. 36 is a pretty good score for me, given that there was over 2,000 submissions. I also found it cool that I was able to get so many ratings, so I guess sending it out to streamers helped overall. Thank you to everyone who tried the game out and rated it. Overall, my favorite game to play was this one called Critical Core, but even apart from that, there were some really good entries I've played. So congrats to everyone who made a game. If you also made a game and you want me to check it out, comment down below with what the name of it is, and I'll go check it out. Be sure to like the video if you made it this far, and subscribe if you want to see my future projects, and turn on the notification bell if you want to be notified about these projects. But other than that, thanks for watching. Until next time, see ya.